Welcome back, Year 3. Today we are reading our final chapter of The Sheep Pig by Dick King-Smith. Now, I've really loved reading this book. It's been such a long time since I've read it, and I've forgotten just how much I love it. So, chapter 11, let's just have a quick recap. They had left Mrs. Hoggett at home and gone off to the sheepdog trials. And Mrs. Hoggett was watching them on the telly at home and complaining that she didn't want to see the pig, and she thought that Mr. Hoggett was a little bit daft for taking the pig just to go and watch some dogs run around. But we know that he's got other plans, don't we? Let's find out. So chapter 12 is called That'll Do. And there's a lovely picture. Here they are driving, and it looks like it's raining. Do you remember in chapter 11 that when Mrs. Hoggett switched on the TV, it was raining on the TV, so she ran outside to get her washing in, but it was sunny at her house. She'd forgotten that a couple of things. One, the sheepdog trials were quite a long way away, and two, it wasn't washing day, so she didn't have any washing on the line to get in anyway. We've all done that. Chapter 12, That'll Do. Hundreds of thousands of pairs of eyes watched that first dog, but none more keenly than those of Hoggett, Fly and Babe. The car park was a big sloping field overlooking the course, and the farmer had driven the Land Rover to the topmost corner, well away from the other cars. From inside it, the three so different faces watched intently. Conditions, Hoggett could see immediately, were very difficult. In addition to the driving rain, which made the going slippery, and the sheep more obstinate than usual. That's a good word, isn't it? Obstinate. I wonder if any of you know what obstinate might mean. I'm going to make a note of it, and I'm going to come back to it at the end of our story. Obstinate. Whilst I'm reading, have a think. Maybe you can pause it if you'd like to. Find a dictionary even. If you can find a dictionary or ask an adult, then I shall let you know at the end of our chapter. There was quite a strong wind blowing almost directly from the holding post back towards the handler, and the dog was finding it hard to hear commands. The more anxious the dog was, the more the sheep tried to break from him, and thus the angrier he became. It was a vicious circle, and when at last the 10 sheep were penned and the handler pulled the gate shut and cried, "That'll do," no one was surprised that they had scored no more than 70 points out of a possible 100. So it went on. Man after man came to stand beside the great sarsen stone, men from the north and from the west, from Scotland and Wales and Ireland, with dogs and bitches large and small, rough-coated and smooth, black and white, or grey or brown, or blue merle. Some fared better than others, of course, were steadier on their sheep, or had steadier sheep to deal with. But still, as Farmer Hoggett's turn drew near, as luck would have it, he was last to go. There was no score higher than 85. At home, Mrs. Hoggett chanced to turn the sound of the television back up in time to hear the commentator confirm this. "One more to go," he said, "and the target to beat is 85 points, set by Mr. Jones from Wales and his dog Bryn. A very creditable total, considering the appalling weather conditions we have up here today. It's very difficult to see that score being beaten. But here comes the last competitor to try and do that." And suddenly there appeared on the screen before Mrs. Hoggett's astonished eyes. There's another good word for you, astonished. There's lots of good words in this chapter. Before Mrs. Hoggett's astonished eyes, the tall, long, striding figure of her husband, walking out towards the great stone with tubby old Fly at his heels. "This is Mr. Hoggett with Pig," said the commentator. "A bit of a strange name that, but then I must say his dog's rather on the fat side. Hello, he's sending the dog back. What on earth? Oh, good heavens! Will you look at that?" Let's just come back. Let's show you Mrs. Hoggett looking astonished. What do you think astonished means? I'm going to write that one down for us as well. Astonished, and we'll talk about these at the end of the chapter. Astonished. Again, if you want to, you can pause it and check a dictionary. And as Mrs. Hoggett and hundreds of thousands of other viewers looked, they saw Fly go trotting back towards the car park. And there she is, look. Fly trotting back to the car park. Look at the faces on the judges in the background. Can you see them? They look a little bit astonished as well, don't they? Have you worked out what that word astonished means yet? And from it, cantering through the never-ending rain, came the long, lean, beautifully clean figure of a large white pig. Straight to Hoggett's side ran Babe and stood like a statue, his great ears fanned, his little eyes fixed upon the distant sheep. There he is, look. Coming cantering out of the car park. Can you see all the cars behind him? And look, it's still raining. He looks... What do you think his expression is? I'm going to write something down. I wonder if you will agree with me. We'll talk about it after. At home, Mrs. Hoggett's mouth opened wide, but for once, no sound came from it. On the course, there was a moment of stunned silence and then a great burst of noise. On the screen, the cameras showed every aspect of the amazing scene. The spectators pointing, gaping, grinning. The red-faced judges hastily conferring. Hoggett and Babe waiting patiently. And finally, the commentator. There were two more words there. Hastily and conferring. Now, I'm not going to write these down. I'm going to tell you what these mean. So hastily means fast. So they were quickly conferring. Now, conferring is a word that means talking. They were kind of talking in hushed voices. Do you think, what's going on? How are we going to deal with this? So they were quickly talking. This is really quite ridiculous, he said with a shamefaced smile. But in point of fact, there seems to be nothing in the rule book that says that only sheepdogs may compete. So it looks as though the judges are bound to allow Mr. Hoggett to run his sheep pig, I suppose we'll have to call it. One look at it and the sheep will disappear into the next county without a doubt. Still, we might as well end the day with a good laugh. And look, there's a picture of all the people in the crowd. They're certainly laughing, aren't they? I wonder if you'd laugh if you saw a sheep pig at this sort of competition. And indeed, in that moment, a great gale of laughter arose as Hoggett, receiving a most unwilling nod from the judges, said quietly, "Away to me, pig," and Babe began his outrun to the right. How they roared at the mere sight of him running, though many noticed how fast he went, and on the purely crazy thought of a pig herding sheep, and especially at the way he squealed and squealed at the top of his voice in foolish excitement, they supposed. But though he was excited, tremendously excited, at the thrill of actually competing in the Grand Challenge Sheepdog Trials, Babe was nobody's fool. He was yelling out the password. I may be ewe, I may be ram, I may be mutton, may be lamb, but on the hoof or on the hook, I bain't so stupid as I look, he hollered as he ran. There's a good word for you, because I know that recently you've been talking about words to describe speech. Now in this one, the word is hollered. So hollered is a bit like shouting. This was the danger point. Before he'd met his sheep, and again, he repeated the magic words, shouting above the noise of wind and rain, his eyes fixed on the 10 sheep by the holding post. Their eyes were just as fixed on him, eyes that bulged at the sight of his great, strange animal approaching, but they held steady. And the now distant crowd fell suddenly silent as they saw the pig take up a perfect position behind his sheep, and heard the astonished judges award 10 points for a faultless outrun. Ah, they're not laughing anymore, I don't think, are they? Just for luck, in case they hadn't believed their ears, Babe gave the password one last time. I bain't so stupid as I look, he panted. It's a very good afternoon to you all, and I do apologise for having to ask you to work in this miserable weather. I hope you'll forgive me. At once, as he had hoped, there was a positive babble of voices. Fancy him knowing the password. What a lovely manners. Not like they nasty wolves. What do you want us to do, young master? Quickly, for he was conscious that time was ticking away, Babe, first asking politely for their attention, outlined the cause to them. "And I would be really most awfully grateful," he said, "if you would all bear these points in mind. Keep tidy together, go at a good steady pace, not too fast, not too slow, and walk exactly through the middle of each of the 3 gates, if you'd be good enough. The moment I enter the shedding ring, would the 4 of you who are wearing collars, how nice they look, by the way, please walk out of it? And then if you'd all kindly go straight into the final pen, I should be much obliged." All this talk took quite a time, and the crowd and the judges and Mr. Hoggett, and Mrs. Hoggett and her hundreds of thousands of fellow viewers began to feel that nothing else was going to happen. That the sheep were never going to move, that the whole thing was a stupid farce, a silly joke that had fallen flat. Oh, hang on, look, there was a picture in there for you. There we go, there's a picture of Babe talking to the sheep. You can see it's still raining, look. Only Hoggett, standing silent in the rain beside the sarsen stone, had complete confidence in the skills of the sheep pig. And suddenly the miracle began to happen. Marching 2 by 2, as steady as guardsmen on parade, the 10 sheep set off for the fetch gates. Babe a few paces behind them, silent, powerful, confident. Straight as a die they went towards the distant Hoggett, straight between the exact centre of the fetch gates, without a moment's hesitation, without deviating an inch from their unswerving course. Hoggett said nothing, made no sign, gave no whistle, did not move as the sheep rounded him so closely as almost to brush his boots. And, the fetch completed, set off for the drive-away gates. Once again their pace never changed, looking neither to left nor to right, keeping so tight a formation that you could have dropped a big tablecloth over the lot. They passed the precise middle of the drive-away gates and turned as one animal to face the cross-drive gates. I'll show you a little picture. You see that? Oh, there we go. And the picture of all the sheep lined up nice and neatly. He's doing a rather splendid job, isn't he? It was just the same here. The sheep passed through perfectly and wheeled for the shedding ring, while at the time the judges' scorecards showed maximum points and the crowd watched in a kind of hypnotised hush, whispering to one another for fear of breaking the spell. He's not put a foot wrong. Bang through the middle of every gate. Lovely, steady pace. And the handler, he's not said a word, not even moved, just stood there, leaning on his stick. But he'll have to move now. You're never going to tell me that pig can shed 4 sheep out of the 10 on his own. The shedding ring was a circle, perhaps 40 yards in diameter, marked out by little heaps of sawdust. And into it the sheep walked, still calm, still collected, and stood waiting. Outside the circle, Babe waited, his eyes on Hoggett. The crowd waited. Mrs. Hoggett waited. There he is. There's Farmer Hoggett. Can you see he's got his collar turned up against the wind and the rain? And this is his shepherd's crook. Hundreds of thousands of viewers waited. Then, just as it seemed nothing more would happen, that the man had somehow lost control of the sheep pig, that the sheep pig had lost interest in his sheep, Farmer Hoggett raised his stick and with it gave one sharp tap upon the great sarsen stone, a tap that sounded like a pistol shot in the tense atmosphere. And at this signal, Babe walked gently into the circle and up to the sheep. There he is, look. He's doing rather well so far, isn't he? Beautifully done, he said to them quietly. I can't tell you how grateful I am to you all. Now, if the 4 ladies with collars would kindly walk out of the ring when I give a grunt, I should be so much obliged. Then if you would all be good enough to wait until my boss has walked across to the final collecting pen over there and opened its gate. All that remains for you to do is to pop in. Would you do that, please? Now, there's a word that I've said a few times now. It's the word obliged. I'm going to write that one down. I wonder if anybody knows what that word means. You might even be able to use it today. It's a good word. "Ah," they said softly. And as Babe gave one deep grunt, the 4 collared sheep detached themselves from their companions and calmly, unhurriedly, walked out of the shedding ring. Unmoving, held by the magic of the moment, the crowd watched with no sound but a great sigh of amazement. No one could quite believe his eyes. No one seemed to notice that the wind had dropped and the rain had stopped. No one was surprised when a single shaft of sunshine came suddenly through a hole in the grey clouds and shone full upon the great sarsen stone. Slowly, with his long strides, Hoggett left it and walked to the little enclosure of hurdles, the final test of his sheep herding. He opened its gates and stood silent, still, while the shed animals walked back into the ring to rejoin the rest. Then he nodded once at Babe, no more, and steadily, smartly, straightly, the 10 sheep, with the sheep pig at their heels, marched into the final pen, and Hoggett closed the gate. As he dropped the loop of rope over the hurdle stake, everyone could see the judge's marks. There we go. There's a picture of them all finally in their little pen. I wonder how Mr. Hoggett's feeling there. How do you think? If that was you, you'd just done something you had always desperately wanted to do and it had gone seemingly very well, how would you be feeling? Maybe you could tell your adult. 100 out of 100. The perfect performance. Never before matched by man and dog in the whole history of sheepdog trials, but now achieved by man and pig, and everyone went mad. At home, Mrs. Hoggett erupted like a volcano into a great lava flow of words, pouring them out towards the 2 figures held by the camera, as though they were actually inside that box in the corner of her sitting room, cheering them, praising them, congratulating first one and then the other, telling them how proud she was, to hurry home, not to be late for supper. It was shepherd's pie. As for the crowd of spectators at the Grand Challenge sheepdog trials, they shouted and yelled and waved their arms and jumped about while the astonished judges scratched their heads and the amazed competitors shook theirs in wondering belief. "Marvellous, marvellous," bleated the 10-penned sheep. And from the back of an ancient Land Rover at the top of the car park, a tubby old black and white collie bitch, her plumed tail wagging wildly, barked and barked and barked for joy. Who do you think that is? Who could that possibly be? Let me read it again. A tubby old black and white collie. Who could that be? In all the hubbub of noise and excitement, 2 figures stood silently side by side. Then Hoggett bent and gently scratched Babe between his great ears, uttered those words that every handler always says to his working companion when the job is finally done. Perhaps no one else heard the words, but there was no doubting the truth of them. "That'll do," said Farmer Hoggett to his sheep pig. "That'll do." There's a lovely picture of them there. A lovely photo. I'm sorry, it's not a photo. A lovely drawing. Mr. Hoggett scratching Babe on his head. And that is the end of our chapter. Now, I've written down a few words here that I want to discuss with you. So the first word we came across was obstinate, and it was how the author had described the sheep. Now, he was talking about the rain making the sheep more obstinate. So hopefully some of you have had a think about it, had a chat with your grown-ups or found a dictionary and had a look. If you haven't done, pause it and off you go and have a quick look and then come back. Hopefully now you found out that the word is obstinate and it means a bit stubborn. So obstinate means stubborn, stubborn means obstinate. It means they're not going to do things without really being told to do them. The other word was astonished, and that was describing how Mrs. Hoggett's eyes were looking. So astonished, show me your best astonished eyes. Might be really wide. And that's surprised. Surprised. She was looking really surprised. Determined. Now that was the picture. Let me see if I can just quickly find a picture of Babe looking determined as he came out of the car park, I think. Now determined is when you are really set to do something. You're going to do your absolute best to achieve whatever goal you set yourself. And the final word, this was a word that Babe was using quite a lot in his speech to the sheep. Now remember, Babe is a very polite pig. So if he's saying he'd be very much obliged, he's saying he would be very, very thankful. So I wonder if you could say much obliged or very obliged to your parents when they give you your lunch or when they help you to do something. You could say much obliged, Mummy, for your help today. Much obliged, Daddy, for making me my lunch. There we go. So there's some new words for you. I wonder if you can see how many times you can use them in your language today. Okay, I will find a new book for us. I hope you've enjoyed The Sheep Pig. I know I certainly have. And it ties in really nicely to your English that you're doing at the moment as well. So take care, everybody. Bye-bye.